Well, I have an Aston Martin DB9 automatic coupe, which I think, to use the Aston parlance, could be regarded as being heavily bespoke. Well, my car history, I think we can divide the car history into three infamous chapters. Chapter number one, the Italian period, where my notoriously biodegradable Alfa Romeos, of which I still have my first one, don't talk to me about the restoration on that, a variety of Fiat Coupe turbos and a variety of other exotica, before I decided I'd had enough of it about that temperamentality, and I moved on to my German period, where I went and bought a variety of Porsches from the factory, which was very enjoyable, going and picking them up, and I found they were absolutely fantastic car, but unfortunately they were a bit too good, because when everything went wrong in the car or the driving, it was almost certainly my fault, and I couldn't find the car to blame it for. Which then moved him on to my slightly more mature phase, where I waved into the world of British cars, and particularly Grand Tourers, which suited my needs of the car at the time. I had a wonderful Jaguar XKR supercharged 4.2, which was a lovely, fantastic Grand Tourer, but it was showing its age a bit in its mechanicals and certainly in its construction, which leads us on to the next chapter. Well, I think it's a marque that has always had an attraction to me. The discretion, the bruiser in the suit, and also the styling and the way that Astons had delivered performance always attracted me. I was particularly enamoured of the VH era of cars because they combined modern technology with something that's very important to me, which is the concept of truth to materials. So in the VH era Aston Martins, if something looks like wood, it is wood. If it looks like leather, it is leather. If it looks like metal, it is metal. And for me, that design ethos combined with the incredible styling of that period was just an extraordinary merger of all the things I wanted from a marque. So choosing DB9 was a bit of a story, really. When I had the XKR, I spent a lot of time trying to persuade myself that it was worth upgrading to a DB7. And even my man maths wasn't able to make the jump, having gone and driven many DB7 Vantages up to the GTA, which was a fantastic car. It wasn't until I drove a DB9 after the DB7 GTA, that I just couldn't believe the step change. The car was of modern construction, very drivable, and yet retained the classic Aston characteristics. I particularly loved the discreet styling, and I really liked the Sarah Maynard interior, which was very minimalist and very elegant to my eyes, an absolute design classic. Well, I'd say I'm in the minority of Aston owners who really put the grand into grand touring. My car is really heavily used. It's coming up to almost 100,000 now on the clock, and it really works for its living. Mainly, I rack up the mileage European grand touring. My particular car has been as far east as Croatia, as far south as the Amalfi Coast, and as far north as Norway. It really has been all over Europe, and added to that, what I like to do most of the weekends, which is get away into the countryside, you know, for a good hike, or just going and seeing some of the wonderful landscapes this country has to offer. It really has racked up the miles. So I would say, in terms of modifications, why I decided to go down the route started with something quite simple, in that when I was looking at the car, you get to a certain age when you think about upgrading it. And the obvious upgrade path from a DB9 at that time was to a DBS, and of course then latterly it was into the Virage / Vanquish Mark II. But for me, the DBS, although it's a truly wonderful car, really wasn't discreet enough for me, which left me with a bit of a conundrum, and a conundrum that only got worse as time went by, as the cars got more and more, how shall I put it, in your face in the styling. So I embarked upon a series of changes to the car, sort of almost by osmosis, gradually changing the car, because I really liked the looks, I liked the classic design of the interior, but there were some things that were niggling me in terms of its ability to compete in the modern world. And that's how my journey into modification began. What have I done to the car? So it actually started by accident, as most man maths projects do. I had the car in for some unrelated engine work at Bamfordrose, and when the work was being done, I was offered the option of getting the primary catalyst removed as a safety option for cat ingestion. The car came back to me, and I tell you, I couldn't believe the differences. And that really opened my eyes to what options were available to modify the car. Now, in my grand touring, and this is another man maths excuse, I do an awful lot of autobahn work. And so you can never have too much power on the autobahn, or at least that's what I keep on telling my bank account anyway. So what started off with, primary cats, started off with a bit of a bad habit. Before you knew it, secondary catalysts were replaced and improved with high flow cats. And then, well, while you were doing, the coil pack and the manifolds, how much effort is it to go and put in the cams, the high lift cams? So the cams got done. And then, perhaps we should go and get the manifolds done properly this time with the nice big manifolds, because if the deletion of the primaries was good, the secondaries are going to be even more improved. And gradually, the differences were absolutely immense. I really, really noticed it on the road, and the performance, really got to a point where it was much closer to the modern cars and much closer to what I was wanting. And then from, just on the performance side of things again, it came to my thinking that really, if I thought about what I wanted from my car, it was basically what I wanted was the performance of an equivalent DBS, but perhaps without all of the rather showy addenda that came with the DBS. So I started looking into the options as to how to replicate that DBS performance whilst maintaining the character of the car I wanted, which is grand tourer, fit for purpose around towns, and actually, very drivable. So first of all, I upgraded the inlet manifolds to the DBS inlet manifolds, which provide more power at higher rev range, but at a bit of a sacrifice for the lower end torque. Now in the production DBS, this is balanced out by a final drive being a bit different and a bit lower. So I had that done as well. So you maintained a very drivable power band. So not only the power at the top, so it wasn't a screamer or a track day, but with the adjustment of the final drive, it turned into a balanced package and was really mechanically a DBS in all but name and appearance. But of course, these performance gains are really nothing without all the other things to balance out the package. And certainly I found some more man maths reasons to go and upgrade the car. Particularly memorable moments was on the original multi-matic dampers, driving down a particularly twisty stretch of Autobahn down to the Black Forest, when I had a bit of a moment that convinced myself beyond any reasonable doubt that I definitely needed to update the dampers to at least the Bilsteins or maybe the adaptive dampers, because they really weren't up to the job considering the extra performance the car had. And that was, pretty transformational as well. The old dampers really is night and day compared to any of the new dampers. Equally, power, I guess, is nothing without control. And I always had a bit of a bugbear with the original DB9 brakes. They were very wooden in feel, and I found them quite hard to make them feel progressive, particularly in enthusiastic driving. And once more again, the man maths came into their own on one particular drive down from the Alps down into the Verdon Gorge, where the brakes were just shocking. I had awful fade from really tricky moments, and it was just a no-brainer at that point to go and get the brakes upgraded to something that reflected the increased power of the car, and also that reflected the fact that this car was actually being driven, for safety's sake, and also it has no impact on unsprung weight, which I'm a big issue about. So the dynamics with the upgrade to the Sport Pack rack, the brakes, and the adaptive suspension really makes a big difference to the way the car drives, and it's a real night and day experience. Many people have commented on how smoothly and effectively it moves through the curves. Yeah, so we talked about them so far, mechanical and suspension upgrades. Of course, during a car's life, you've got, various wear and tear elements, and certainly for me, just to make it a little bit more bespoke, because this is really a keeper car for me, I also paid a little bit of attention to the interior and had it rather discreetly retrimmed. You might notice on the pictures it's got a diamond pattern, which is not too far away from the DB9 Superleggera that was created for one customer. And the idea is just to provide a little lift to the interior, along with the aluminium buttons and also the crystal buttons for the gears and the controls, which really make a big lift in my opinion. This way you can keep the original classic DB9 interior, but uplift the quality and, for me, continue the design purity of that line. In the exterior, really, it's more about just making sure that the paintwork is in one piece, and I think you do need to invest on these cars a little bit in the paintwork. Frequently you will have issues with the infamous corrosion on the VH line models, and just keeping up to date with keeping the paintwork sprayed and corrosion tackled at an early stage really makes a difference. And if you're driving it as regularly as I do, then you just have to accept as part of your maintenance regime that every few years or so you're going to need to get a front respray and a little bit of work done, especially if you drive through as many cobbled streets and narrow medieval streets as I do, where unfortunately the inevitable scrape or two occurs on the car. So that's something that I keep under constant maintenance. Well, any more trips, any more modifications? What are my plans? Well, I think you may have noticed when I described where my car had been, I talked about going as far north as Norway, as far east as Croatia, and as far south as the Amalfi Coast in Italy, which just leaves us with the west. And I'm currently planning a grand tour of some of the Roman sites, a particular interest of mine. In Spain and Portugal I haven't been, so an epic tour right down to the far southwest of Spain via Portugal is on the cards. In terms of modifications, as I mentioned, my car's coming up for its 100,000th mile, which is a really important milestone for me. And as I mentioned before, the man maths and more power and autobahns is a pretty much insatiable problem. And at some prompting, we are currently hatching a plan for the ultimate upgrade of the V12 to a blueprinted and bored version of it, which I'm sure you'll probably hear a little bit more on the social media pages. We're aiming to bore it out to about 6.5 litres, which should considerably improve our power, especially with the blueprinting and lightning with the special forged components that will entail. So there's still another page or two of the chapter of this car to be had, and hopefully many more miles and many more journeys to be had.